Liam Andrews had always prided himself on being a man of conviction, a hard worker, a loyal friend, and above all, a devoted husband. At 32, he had built a comfortable life for himself and his wife, Madison. Their home, a charming craftsman-style house on the outskirts of Chicago, was his pride and joy. He had poured his weekends into renovating it, building their life brick by brick. The house wasn't just a place to live. It was a symbol of their union, their shared dreams. Or so he thought. Madison was the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. Confident, beautiful, with a smile that could light up a room. When they'd first met, Liam had been captivated not just by her looks but by her vivacious spirit. She had a way of making him feel like he was the only man in the world. But lately something had changed. It started small. Missed dinners, vague excuses about work running late, and an unfamiliar distance that crept into their conversations. Madison's laughter, once so warm and infectious, now felt hollow, forced. Liam told himself it was just a rough patch. Every marriage had them, right? But the signs were there, no matter how much he tried to ignore them. Madison's phone was suddenly glued to her hand, the screen tilted away whenever he entered the room. Her weekend errands seemed to stretch longer and longer. And then there were the whispered phone calls in the middle of the night, followed by her dismissive, "It's just a friend from work." One Friday evening, Liam came home early from his job at a tech startup, hoping to surprise Madison with dinner. He walked into their home, the aroma of her favorite takeout filling the air, only to find the house empty. Her car was gone, and a cryptic note sat on the counter. "Out with the girls. Don't wait up." Liam stared at the note, unease settling in his chest. Madison rarely went out without telling him beforehand. And the girls? He hadn't heard her mention them in months. He spent the evening trying to focus on a movie, but his mind kept drifting. Something wasn't right. Around midnight, Madison finally came home, her hair tousled and her perfume overwhelming. She offered a quick kiss on the cheek, mumbled about how tired she was, and disappeared into the bedroom. That night, as Liam lay awake staring at the ceiling, he felt a gnawing sensation he couldn't shake. He wanted to believe Madison's story, but the inconsistencies were piling up. The tipping point came a week later. Madison had left her laptop open on the kitchen table while she took a shower. Liam wasn't the prying type, but as he walked past, a message notification popped up on the screen. It was from someone named Carter. "Can't stop thinking about last night. Same time tomorrow." Liam's heart sank. His hands trembled as he clicked on the message thread. What he found made his stomach churn. Dozens of flirty, suggestive messages exchanged over the past month. Some were vague, others explicit, but the implication was clear. Madison was having an affair. When Madison came back into the kitchen, wrapped in a towel, Liam had already closed the laptop and returned to his seat. He said nothing, his face a mask of calm. But inside, his emotions were a tempest: anger, hurt, confusion, and a desperate need for answers. From that moment on, Liam knew he couldn't confront Madison without solid proof. She was clever, skilled at deflection. If he accused her now, she'd twist the situation, make him doubt himself. No, he needed to be certain. Liam began his covert investigation. He installed a GPS tracker on her car, noting every late-night work meeting that led to an unfamiliar address downtown. He reviewed their credit card statements, finding charges for expensive dinners and boutique hotel stays that Madison had never mentioned. He even created a fake social media account, posing as someone she might flirt with, just to see how far she'd go. What he uncovered was worse than he could have imagined. Madison wasn't just unfaithful, she was reckless. Her affair with Carter wasn't her first. It was merely the latest in a pattern of betrayals that stretched back years. Liam found messages to other men, each relationship overlapping the last. Every discovery felt like a knife to the heart, but Liam refused to let his emotions cloud his judgment. He compiled screenshots, photos, and videos, evidence that left no room for denial. His plan wasn't just to confront Madison, but to expose her in a way she could never recover from. For now, he kept up the charade, acting the part of the loving husband while silently piecing together the puzzle. He played his role so convincingly that even Madison seemed unaware of the storm brewing beneath his composed exterior. But Liam wasn't just gathering evidence. He was planning his next move. He reached out to an old friend, Natalie, who worked in public relations. Together, they crafted a strategy to ensure that when the truth came out, it would hit Madison like a tidal wave. As he stared at the file of damning evidence one night, Liam felt a surge of resolve. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming his dignity, his life, and his future. Madison had taken him for a fool, but she had underestimated his resilience. The cracks in the mirror of their perfect marriage had turned into a shattering realization. And Liam was ready to pick up the pieces, not to rebuild what they had, but to create something stronger without her in it. The moment Liam decided to uncover the truth about Madison, his world shifted. Gone was the naive, trusting husband who once turned a blind eye to the little inconsistencies. In his place was a man on a mission, determined to expose the truth, no matter how painful it might be. His first step was to test the boundaries of Madison's lies. On a Saturday morning, over coffee, he casually brought up her recent late nights. "I know work's been crazy lately," he said, his tone light, "but I miss our time together. Maybe I could swing by the office one evening and bring you dinner." Madison's response was immediate and telling. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Oh, that's sweet, but you don't have to. Things have been so hectic. I'd hate for you to get caught up in the chaos." Liam nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Inside, he noted the hesitation, the way her eyes darted away from his. It was a small crack in her facade, but it was enough to stoke the fire in him. That evening, while Madison was out running errands, Liam put his plan into action. He retrieved the GPS tracker he'd ordered online and installed it discreetly under the bumper of her car. It wasn't the kind of thing he'd ever imagined himself doing, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Over the next few days, the tracker proved invaluable. Madison's car wasn't going to the office or the gym, as she claimed. Instead, it frequented an upscale wine bar downtown and, more troublingly, a boutique hotel on the edge of the city. Liam decided to see for himself. On a rainy Wednesday evening, Madison texted him that she'd be working late again. Liam pretended to accept her excuse, wishing her a good night. But as soon as she left, he grabbed his coat and car keys, determined to follow her. He kept a safe distance as he tailed her car through the slick city streets. His heart pounded with a mix of adrenaline and dread. What would he do if he caught her in the act? Was he ready for that kind of confrontation? Madison parked outside the wine bar, her movements casual and unhurried. Liam parked a block away, watching as she stepped inside. He waited for a moment, then followed, careful to keep a low profile. The dimly lit bar was buzzing with conversation and laughter, but his eyes zeroed in on her immediately. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man in his mid-30s, sharply dressed, with an easy smile. Madison leaned in close, laughing at something he said, her hand brushing his arm. The intimacy between them was undeniable. Liam's chest tightened as he took out his phone and snapped a photo. He didn't stay long, just enough to gather evidence without being noticed. He slipped out of the bar, his mind racing. Back home, Liam reviewed the photo he'd taken. It was grainy, taken in low light, but it was enough to confirm what he'd suspected. Madison wasn't just lying to him. She was actively betraying him. The next morning, Liam's resolve hardened. He began delving deeper into Madison's life, searching for any clues she might have overlooked. Her phone was locked, but her laptop was a goldmine of information. In her email, he found a thread with the man from the bar, Carter. Their messages were flirtatious, their tone unmistakable. What struck Liam most wasn't just the content of the emails, but Madison's audacity. She wasn't even trying to hide it. There were dinner reservations under her name, hotel confirmations, even photos attached to some of their messages. Liam compiled everything into a folder on his laptop, labeling it the truth. He wasn't sure yet what he would do with it, but having the evidence gave him a sense of control. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was one step ahead. But the more he uncovered, the deeper the betrayal went. Carter wasn't the only man Madison had been seeing. In another email account, one Liam hadn't even known she had, he found messages to two other men. The dates and details overlapped, creating a tangled web of deceit. Liam's world was crumbling, but he refused to let it break him. Instead, he focused on building his case. He recorded conversations, noting the times when Madison's lies didn't line up. He checked their shared bank account and found suspicious charges, jewelry, expensive dinners, even flights to cities he'd never heard her mention. As the weeks went on, Liam became a ghost in his own home. He pretended to be the loving husband Madison expected, all while silently gathering the evidence that would bring her lies crashing down. One night, as Madison lay asleep beside him, Liam stared at the ceiling, his mind replaying everything he'd discovered. He thought about confronting her, about demanding answers. But he knew it wasn't enough. Madison was a master manipulator. If he went to her with his suspicions now, she'd find a way to twist the narrative. No, he needed to wait. He needed to hit her where it hurt the most. And so, he kept his secrets, biding his time. Each smile, each kiss, each casual conversation was another brick in the wall he was building around himself. He would let Madison think she'd won, let her believe her lies had gone unnoticed. But when the time came, he would pull the rug out from under her so thoroughly that she'd have nowhere to run. The cracks in their marriage weren't just cracks anymore. They were gaping chasms, and Liam was determined to ensure that when everything fell apart, Madison would be the one left in the rubble. Liam's newfound determination to expose Madison's deceit consumed him. Each day, he moved with quiet precision, piecing together the fragments of her double life. He knew he had to keep his emotions in check, no matter how hard it was to see her smile at him in the mornings or kiss him goodbye as she left for work. It was all a performance, and he was determined to outplay her. The GPS tracker continued to yield invaluable clues. Madison's patterns were predictable: wine bars, boutique hotels, occasional trips to upscale restaurants. But the most intriguing discovery came one Thursday night when she veered off her usual route. The tracker pinged her location at an address Liam didn't recognize, an unassuming townhouse in a quiet neighborhood. Liam parked a few blocks away and waited, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He watched as Madison exited her car, dressed in a sleek black dress and heels, and walked up to the door. A man greeted her, pulling her into a tight embrace before ushering her inside. This wasn't Carter, the man from the wine bar. This was someone new. Liam's heart raced as he took out his phone and began snapping photos. The townhouse's curtains were drawn, but he could make out faint shadows moving inside. What was she doing in there? Who was this man? He couldn't sit in his car forever. After a few minutes, Liam got out and walked toward the house, keeping to the shadows. As he approached the driveway, he spotted a car parked nearby with a familiar decal on the bumper, an emblem for the company Madison claimed to work for. It didn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. The man she was with wasn't just some fling. He was one of her co-workers. Liam felt a surge of anger as he realized the extent of her betrayal. She wasn't just lying to him. She was flaunting her infidelity in the very spaces she pretended were professional. That night, back at home, Liam began researching the man. His name was Ethan, and a quick search revealed that he was a senior manager at Madison's company. Social media showed him to be charming and successful, with a carefully curated image of perfection. But Liam wasn't fooled. The more he dug, the more connections he found between Madison and Ethan. Shared conference trips, after-hours meetings, and even casual photos taken at office parties. Madison had introduced him to Ethan once, years ago, as just a co-worker. Now Liam saw the lie for what it was, a cover for something deeper. The following weekend, Liam decided to take things a step further. He'd been debating whether to hire a private investigator, but he realized he didn't need one. He had all the tools he needed. On Saturday morning, while Madison was out shopping, Liam installed a hidden camera in their living room. It wasn't invasive, it only captured the common areas, but he hoped it would catch anything unusual. He also purchased a voice-activated recorder and discreetly placed it under the driver's seat of her car. The waiting game was the hardest part. Each day, Liam pretended everything was fine, even as the tension in his chest grew. Madison continued her charade, completely unaware of his surveillance. The breakthrough came 3 days later. The voice recorder captured a conversation Madison had on her way to meet Ethan. "You're sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Ethan's voice crackled through the recording. "Please," Madison replied, laughing softly. "Liam wouldn't notice if I tattooed liar on my forehead. He's so predictable. I'll just tell him I'm working late, and he buys it every time." Hearing her mocking tone felt like a knife to Liam's gut. He listened to the rest of the recording, each word driving him further toward his breaking point. They joked about their secret meetings, about how easy it was to keep him in the dark. But Madison had underestimated Liam. With the damning recording in hand, Liam knew it was time to escalate his plans. That evening, he sat in their home office, compiling everything he'd gathered: GPS data, photos, email screenshots, the voice recording. The folder labeled "The Truth" had grown into a massive dossier. As he reviewed the materials, he noticed something strange. In one of Madison's emails to Ethan, there was a reference to a third person. "Don't forget, Ryan's counting on us to keep this under wraps." "Ryan?" Liam frowned. He recognized the name immediately. It was his oldest friend, someone he'd known since college. But what did Ryan have to do with this? Liam felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Could it be possible that Madison's betrayal extended beyond Ethan? He decided to confront Ryan directly, but subtly. The next day, he invited him over for a beer, keeping the conversation casual. "So," Liam said, leaning back on the couch, "you and Madison ever cross paths? She mentioned your name the other day, something about work." Ryan froze for a split second before taking a long sip of his beer. Yeah, we've bumped into each other a few times. Nothing major." Liam didn't press further, but he filed away Ryan's reaction. It wasn't guilt, at least, not overtly, but it was enough to make Liam suspicious that a week later, Liam's patience paid off. The hidden camera in the living room captured something he hadn't expected: Madison inviting Ryan over while Liam was at work. Their interaction was friendly at first, but it quickly escalated. They sat on the couch, their voices hushed but their body language intimate. Liam felt a wave of nausea as he watched Ryan lean in and kiss Madison. The betrayal was complete. Liam turned off the recording and sat in stunned silence. He thought he'd prepared himself for the worst, but seeing his wife and best friend together was a new kind of pain. But it also solidified his resolve. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was a conspiracy, a deliberate act of betrayal by the two people he trusted most. Liam didn't sleep that night. He spent hours meticulously planning his next move. Madison and Ryan thought they were untouchable, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The pieces were all in place. The web of lies they had spun was about to collapse, and Liam was ready to ensure that when it did, it would take them both down with it. James planned his confrontation meticulously. He chose their anniversary party, a lavish affair Vanessa insisted on hosting, with friends, family, and colleagues in attendance. As Vanessa flitted around the room, charming guests and playing the devoted wife, James felt a cold calm settle over him. When the dinner speeches began, James stood up, holding a glass of champagne. The room quieted, and Vanessa beamed at him, expecting a loving tribute. "I'd like to propose a toast," James began, his voice steady. "To honesty, to loyalty, to the vows we make and the promises we break." Vanessa's smile faltered. "You see," James continued, "marriage is about trust. But what happens when that trust is shattered? What happens when the person you love most in the world turns out to be a liar?" Gasps rippled through the room as James pulled out his phone and connected it to the projector. One by one, the damning photos and emails filled the screen. Vanessa's affairs were laid bare for everyone to see. The room erupted into chaos. Vanessa's friends turned away in shock. Her parents looked mortified, and her lovers, two of whom were present, quietly slipped out the door. Vanessa stood frozen, her face pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could you do this to me?" she stammered. "No, Vanessa," James said, his voice cold. "How could you do this to us?" He walked out, leaving her to face the fallout alone. The weeks following the party were a blur for James. He filed for divorce, cutting Vanessa out of his life entirely. She tried to contact him, begging for forgiveness, but James didn't respond. For a while, he felt lost. The betrayal had left a scar, and the memories haunted him. But slowly he began to rebuild. He threw himself into his work, took up boxing to channel his anger, and started spending time with friends he had neglected during his marriage. One evening, while sitting at a bar, James struck up a conversation with a woman named Clara. She was kind, funny, and refreshingly honest. For the first time in years, James felt a spark of hope. A year later, James stood in the same restaurant where he had once followed Vanessa. This time, he was on a date with Clara. As they laughed over shared stories, James realized he hadn't thought about Vanessa in weeks. She had tried to ruin him, but in the end, he had come out stronger. The betrayal, once a source of pain, now felt like a distant nightmare, a lesson learned. As he looked at Clara, James felt a sense of peace. He had survived the storm, and now he was ready to embrace the calm. And Vanessa? Rumor had it her life had fallen apart, jobless, friendless, and drowning in the consequences of her lies. But James didn't care anymore. He had moved on, because sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.